What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And today, my bright and lovely friend here is Nancy McKay.
Gary,
Hi, Nance.
great to be here.
You ready to have some fun?
I am ready.
Yeah, we're going to take a serious topic of healing and love and overcoming, and we're going to have fun with it. We're going to help a bunch of people. That sound good?
Sounds awesome.
Love it. Love it. So I'm going to read Nancy's bio so everyone knows who we're playing with, and then we'll jump in the pool. So here we go. Nancy McKay is a life coach, Equus coach, master facilitator, and a She Recovers coach who has empowered women to transform their lives through self-recovery and healing. As the founder of Women Empowered Recovery, Nancy provides a safe and judgment-free space for women to explore their fears, overcome struggles, and rediscover purpose. A lifelong sobriety journey and survival of ovarian cancer inspired her passion for helping others rise above life's challenges. Nancy is a contributing author to 3 multi-author books. Her chapters, The Intersection of Desperation and Grace for Ready to Fly, Volume 3, The Gifts of Adversity for international bestseller, Phoenix Rising, Powerful Women Who Rose from the Ashes to Claim Their Place, and Your Inner Wisdom for international bestseller, Corporate Dropouts from Employee to Entrepreneur. Each capture her inspiring story of recovery and creating a new life after cancer. She has appeared as a featured guest on the Kathy J Show and Denver's Local 3. Nancy is based in Lakewood, Colorado, and is available for speaking opportunities across the U.S., global, and virtual summits, podcasts, and interviews. So right on. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to cover with this stuff.
Here we are.
I love it. I love it. So just because we are the What If You Could podcast, I have my one question that I'm allowed per podcast. And my question is, with all that you've done and all that you've been through and everything you're doing moving forward, I mean, have you had a what if you could moment, or do you have a what if you could thought you wanted to share with the gang?
Yes, I definitely have had a what if you could. And it really came after I was diagnosed with cancer, and at least that's the latest, latest one. After I was diagnosed with cancer, and probably it took about 6 months or a year or so after that, I kind of thought to myself, what if I could do anything I wanted? And what would that be? And I had become disillusioned with my corporate job. And, it was I worked for a wonderful company. I was making good money and had great benefits. And I was really pretty unhappy. And there's something about getting a cancer diagnosis that makes you kind of take stock, right? And I thought, I got sober and survived cancer to really live an inspired life. And am I doing that? And the answer was no. And so I decided that I was following Martha Beck. And I just knew that there was something more purposeful for me to follow in my life. And so I decided to become a life coach. And so at the age of 61, I started training for that. And I really haven't looked back. I've continued my education and have added Equus Coaching to my repertoire, so to speak. And so my favorite thing to do is to help women and work with horses at the same time. And it's very fulfilling, and I've found my purpose. I mean, that's what it is. And it's um so that was my what if I could, and um I'm doing that. And now my what if I could is, what if I could help more women um and just, you know, make a decent living. And what if I could help a lot more women? So
Walk us through the kind of like the time frame. So what came first, the cancer or the sobriety?
the sobriety came first.
So how long have you been sober?
I'm coming up on 16 years.
Right on. Congratulations.
Thank you. Um, and my cancer is coming up on 10 years it'll be 10 years on Sunday.
That is a very good number. 10
Yeah.
years is a great number.
Yeah.
I just passed my 2 year. So yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah, looking forward to 5, but
Yep.
10's a good, 10's a good.
Yep. Yep. Those first 5 years are a little kind of looking over your shoulder a little bit. I
Massive
understand that.
scanxiety. You have
Yeah.
scanxiety when every six
Ex-
months when you're going for that stupid scan, you're like, you have that scan that. So on the sobriety, you were in your corporate gig and just, you know, going out
Actually,
after whatever, or were you
yeah,
already done with that?
actually, at the time I got sober, I was self-employed. I was a kitchen and bath designer at that point in my life. And my father had died by suicide in 2007. And that took my heavy drinking kind of into another level. I wasn't, a 24/7 drinker. I wasn't waking up in the morning and drinking, but I was drinking more, and I was drinking to uh, cope with my feelings of guilt and grief. And so it just took on a um, whole different person, not personality, but it was just a different level of drinking. I'd always been kind of a party girl and very social drinker. Um, and this was different. And so in 2009, March 13th, Friday the 13th of 2009, March, I, yeah, I attempted suicide myself, and fortunately was not successful, but that scared me sober. That was the last time I drank. So, yeah.
You have a number of things there that you've overcome. You know, my wife's 21 years sober. When I met, she's my second wife. My first wife passed from cancer.
Mm,
So we all love cancer, of course,
mm,
evil, vicious piece of shit that it is. But so I learned a lot about AA and sobriety and stuff when I met my wife, when she told me she was
mhm,
sober and stuff. Um, it's a real battle, sobriety. But when you throw in, your father's suicide and then your attempted suicide, um, that's a lot of weight, kiddo. I mean, that's a lot of stuff. Our psyches can only handle so much before they just shut us down. Did you have any breakdowns? Did you have any just besides,
Well,
the attempt
yeah,
or
I think that's what was happening really between my father's death and my attempted suicide, was that sort of um sort of breaking down. And that the Friday the 13th felt like I was having, a nervous breakdown. And I I just I didn't to be honest with you, I didn't have that much to drink, at least not by my estimation that day. But for some reason, it was one of those things where I had gotten to the point where my drinking was unpredictable. So my reaction to my drinking was unpredictable. So sometimes I could drink a lot and hardly feel a thing. And sometimes I could drink very little and be stumbling and slurring and so on and so forth. And that's what happened that day. And it also was, I was at this point where I was really struggling in my kitchen and bath business. And, it just felt like shit was hitting the fan left and right. And so I decided when we got home from the bar that night that, and my husband said, I think you've had enough to drink. I felt like I went from angry to very melancholy in a nanosecond, and decided that everyone would be better off without me. And so that was my rock bottom. And so I, took measures to take care of that. And fortunately, it didn't work. So, but it's,
One thing we know for sure, don't tell a drinker that you've had enough.
oh,
You tell me I've had enough, and it's like, I'll have a double, please.
yes,
You don't
exactly.
tell a drinker you've had enough.
No,
It just doesn't work well, right? That
no,
doesn't go over well. That kind of
no.
fires you back up.
Yeah. So, um, it was a shitstorm. And, um, or a perfect storm, depending on how you look at it. And I'm really grateful because, if I'm grateful that I survived, but I'm also grateful that I had gotten to the point before I really fell into deep alcoholism. I wasn't um, a, a a morning drinker. I didn't have to drink 24 hours a day. Um, I, I had no consequences. And so, my health wasn't in the toilet. My mental health was in the toilet, but, physically I was still functioning. I was still pretty high functioning. And so, I consider myself lucky that I was able to stop drinking without, um, having severe consequences, um, you know, with the exception of a
There's something
failed
about
suicide attempt.
there's something about that deep grief, there's something about that deep grief that is I know after I lost my first wife to cancer, it was wicked. I mean, it's a 10-year anniversary last month, and it's still bad. It just never goes away. It's still as bad. But you kind of learn to ride through the swells of the grief,
Right.
But when I contemplated ending it, it was more of a stop the pain kind of thing.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
like I'd rather just, throw this gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and just to stop the pain, because the pain, you can't drink the pain away, you can't fuck the pain away, you can't
Right.
gamble the pain away. You can't pray the pain away. There's nothing you can do. The pain just like there, and it stays there. Um, so you had to come out of the grief. You had to come out of trying to get sober. You had to come out with the biz. There's a lot going on. for you at that time.
Yeah, yeah, it was. And so I had a few design projects, but not much. And so I was very lucky in that I still had a little bit of my inheritance left, and I was able to concentrate on recovery for the first year, really. And that was my job. And I dove headfirst into it. And and so it was after I had hit that 1 year mark that it was time for me to pull up my you know big girl panties and get a job, because at that point my business had gone through the uh 2008 downturn, and so all the custom home builders that I was working with were really slowing down, and I had to get a real job. And fortunately I had a lot of experience in the oil and gas industry, and so I went back into that industry and found this really good job, and I was with them for 9 years.
Mhm.
um
Were you kind of always entrepreneurial? Because running your own kitchen and bath gig is really entrepreneurial. I mean,
yeah,
it's a
I
real ebb and flow business.
yes, I have always had that streak in me, and I think I got that from um my my great grandfather. I think it was my dad's grandfather had a very entrepreneurial spirit, and so I think I come by it through him. But I always wanted to be my own boss, have my own gig. And so I worked for other kitchen and bath companies, and I wanted to strike out on my own. I wasn't given the sales opportunity that I wanted with them, and so I thought, well, I'll go out and do it on my own. I have
Yeah,
I have
screw you, assholes. I'm going to go take all your business and do it myself.
yeah, well, no, that didn't happen, but for some reason I am a big picture person, and so I think that things can be done, that maybe you know, uh, I have a very optimistic and rose-colored glasses, probably. But that's what carried me through to today. And it's one of those things that for me is really important. It's, um, I've just had this optimistic, I can do anything I put my mind to. And it hasn't always worked out the way I envisioned it, but it has, it's worked out well enough, and I feel like I'm helping people.
Yeah. Were you just out of curiosity, not to get too personal, like we can't get any more personal, but are you are you still with the same husband when you got through sobriety?
Yes, I am.
That is awesome. So you guys were
Yep.
able to ride all that bullshit out together. So that, I mean,
Yeah.
that was a pretty that's a lot, on a
Yeah. Yeah.
spouse, being a caregiver to someone going through sobriety, being a caregiver to someone who's going through cancer,
Yep.
the businesses and all that stuff,
Oh yeah.
then you with the
Yeah.
suicide of your dad. That's a lot. I mean, you guys probably have a pretty strong bond at this point.
We've been together for 27 years altogether. We've been married. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary in September.
Awesome.
And he's my rock. Um, how he has stuck with me. Sometimes I don't know how he's done it. And um, I'm very, very lucky. he's also very lucky. But
That's why he's still here.
but it,
Because
yeah,
he's
but
very lucky too.
mhm,
He's
but
not stupid. He's not a stupid
no,
man.
no. Sometimes I wonder if he is for sticking with me, but he's he's a very loyal and um he loves me.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't know why, but he does. So
Well, that's
I'm
sometimes we don't question those things because it just
exactly.
is there's an ass for every saddle. What they like to say in the car business.
I like that. Yes.
So you go through these challenges. You go through your father's suicide. You go through your addiction. You're coming out. You're getting sober. And then the universe says, "Well, I'm going to kick her in the nuts one more time. So let's give as you're coming out of this, right? Let's give her cancer. Why not? Let's just, right? I mean, were you kind of in your sobriety, you're coming out of this, you're doing your work, and then all of a sudden, here comes
Yeah,
cancer.
it was kind of out of the blue. It was 6 years later. So fortunately I had some time under my belt. And one of the things that they think you think about when you get sober is what's going to make me drink again, and uh I think everybody was on pins and needles if a cancer diagnosis would put me over the edge. And it's so interesting because I never asked why me. I it was kind of like, well, yeah, why not me? I mean, the percentages and the statistics are more that you get cancer than you don't, really, I think. And um so it was interesting that I got ovarian cancer, that I don't have any history of that in my family. And um you know I just pulled the short straw, I guess. But that I also look at as a gift because it got me to where I am now. It got me out of um the feeling of that this is all there is. This is as good as it's going to get. And uh you know and fortunately it had me take stock and say, what if I could? What if I could do something different? What if I could help people? What if I could uh, make a difference?
You know what's interesting about sobriety that my wife always tells me? She goes, we don't worry about drinking when shit hits the fan and things get really bad. Most people break their sobriety when things are really good. It's like, I feel great. I've made it 10 years. Everything's fine. I can have a drink now. Everything's great. And that's when they go, not when the bad times,
Exactly.
which is
Well,
kind of a
the
weird phenomenon.
the biggest craving that I have had to date was at 8 years sober. We were on vacation. I had been to a meeting that morning. Everything was fine and dandy. I mean, there was not anything. But for some reason, being on vacation has always, it's always when you kick back and you have a glass of wine, and that's it hit me, and it hit me hard. And fortunately, I didn't act on it. But it was amazing um how strong that craving was, and everything was going swimmingly in my life.
Yeah,
So,
it's that good time, like things are okay. I'm all right now. So, how did you find the cancer? For me, I had this for my wife. She just wasn't feeling it. It took us months and months fighting with the assholes to get them to do the proper test, and they finally did. And they go, "Oh shit, you've got stage 4 cancer." Oh, great.
oh my God.
Yeah, for me, it was a little lump on my throat, and I know my body really well. I'm kind of a health nut, and I just was like, "Hey, man, this is not right." And they're like, "Oh, it's swollen lymph node or." Then months later, it's, oh, it's this. I'm like, I'm telling you, I want a biopsy because something's not right. So they do biopsy. And they go, oh, it's cancer. I'm like, yeah, I told you that 9 months ago. How did you, how did yours come about as far as discovering it, and what was the process, all that?
Well, interestingly enough, I was getting ready to go to work, got out of the shower, doubled over in pain, thought I was having an appendicitis attack.
Mm.
Um, Snowing like a son of a bitch here in Denver. And so we got in the car and headed to the emergency room. And the pain started to subside a little bit. And so I'm like, false alarm, let's turn around and go home. And Jimmy's like, well, we're almost there. We might as well. So get to the emergency room. They do all the ultrasounds and all the things. And they tell me I have a fibroid on my right ovary that I'll want to have checked out with my regular doctor. So they gave me some pain meds and they sent me on my way and got home, called my doctor's office um, repeatedly. I'll admit that I was kind of a pain in the ass to try to get an appointment ASAP. They finally responded to me and got me in, I believe it was the next day. And my female gynecologist scolded me for being a pain in the ass and said, Nancy, fibroids rarely turn to cancer. But if you insist, we'll do another ultrasound so that was in November. They wouldn't do it until January for some reason. I don't know why. She couldn't read the test that they sent from the emergency room. So I wait until like January 2nd, and the next, several days later, the next week, she calls and says, I'm sorry, but you have a mass on your right ovary and I'm referring you to an oncologist. So, they did surgery on my 58th birthday, which is, on Sunday, and found out that, they do the pathology while I was on the table, and woke up to find out I had stage 1C ovarian cancer. And so it was far, severe enough to warrant chemo, but it hadn't spread anywhere yet. So it was contained and he got all of it. And so the chemo was kind of like an insurance policy, and I wasn't going to do it. And then I decided to do it and all the things. So,
Yeah. It's the one thing cancer teaches us is that we have to be our own advocate.
mhm,
I was a pain in the ass to my doctor. I mean, just beating on them to do a biopsy, you know,
right,
because I'm like, look, I've already been here. This is not my first rodeo with you kind of folks. All right. Love you, doctors, but it took almost a year to get my wife in when she's dying. I mean, she'd have been in emergency 4 or 5 times, the ambulance taking her in because her stomach is killing her so bad. And you won't scope her fucking stomach. It's like, what's wrong with you people? Obviously, something's wrong with her stomach. They finally scope it and go, oh, yeah, she's got stage 4 stomach cancer. I'm like, what would have happened if you would have found this 9 months ago? Would it be stage 3? Would it still be stage 4? I don't know, but you have to be your own advocate when it comes to medicine. The doctors are overwhelmed. They don't, I mean,
right.
doctors are bailing it right and left from medicine because it sucks so bad. So,
Well, and I think it has so much to do with the insurance business. And,
of course,
you know, doctors are spread way too thin, and, you know,
the
they
insurance
they
companies run the
yeah.
medicine. So, how many chemos did you have to do?
I did 6 rounds. So it was every 3 weeks for, 5 months, basically. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
chemo sucks.
I was really, really lucky. Touch wood. My hair fell out, of course. And uh the biggest side effect I had was fatigue. Every round, I got more and more insomnia. And so the fatigue was just debilitating, and I missed a lot of work. I should have just taken a leave of absence. If I had known it would have affected me the way it did, I would have done that. It would have been better. I would have been better off. Um, but that was really it. I had a patch for nausea, and I was really lucky.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't lose my hair. Cisplatin doesn't take your hair, but what I discovered is it takes your hearing. I
Oh,
thought the radiation took my hearing because I had 36 rounds of radiation on my head and neck. That's why I'm like I. So when I couldn't hear anymore, I was like, well, shit balls. You know, it must have been the radiation. But they said no, it was just cisplatin. The chemo took your hearing, so that's why now I'm deaf and I need to get hearing aids, which I'll figure out to do. So you go through all this. You go through your father. You go through the sobriety. You go through the cancer, and you say to yourself, "Self, there's got to be more to life. I don't want to do this. I want to do something. I want to add to life. I want to help other people." So what started first? Because you're a life coach. I know the Equus came later. You're a master facilitator. You have She Recovers Coach, a woman empowered recovery. I mean, you've got a whole shitload of stuff here. So how did it start? What did you do? You just go, I'm going to chuck everything and start doing this stuff?
well, I got my training. I got my first certification and started working with clients. And I probably quit my job too soon. Uh, my husband was um, unhappy about that. But
Yeah.
I was convinced that I would be able to make a go of it. And it's been difficult. I'm coming up on 6 years in business, and um, I have, you know, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
And um, so it's been a struggle. There's no doubt about it, but it's very rewarding. And one of the clients that I'm working with right now um, gave me a beautiful thank you card when she hit her 3 months of sobriety. And I cried when I read it, and my husband cried when I read it, and when he read it, rather. And I said, now you know why I do what I do. And um, I may not be making a lot of money, but I am making a difference. And for me, that's what it's all about. And I got sober in AA, and had a really great community with them. And then the pandemic hit, and um, you know, everything went sideways, right? I mean, and so I was really looking for another community, and I found She Recovers, and I really love their platform and their intentions and their guiding principles, and I wanted to become a coach for them. And so I went through their training and became a coach for them. And so I volunteer my time, and it's just it's something I truly believe in. And
What is She Recovers Coach? What is She
so
Recovers?
She Recovers is a nonprofit organization that is for women in or seeking recovery, also non-binary individuals that identify with women's communities. And they have twice daily online meetings free of charge. Everything is uh, really, for the most part, free of charge. And so I facilitate online meetings. I facilitate a sharing circle here in Denver once a month. And I've been lucky enough to co-facilitate retreats for them. I did one last September in Texas, and I'm doing it again in June. And it's an amazing community because it's not just about recovering from alcohol. It's, their tenet is we're all recovering from something, right?
Yeah.
So it could be grief, it could be trauma, it could be relationship issues, it can be cancer, it can be eating disorders, it can be anything, right? We're all recovering from something. And that's something that I believed even before I found them. And so when I found them and saw that was one of their taglines, I'm like, oh, you're my kind of people. I have found my home here. And so that's why I just, I jumped in with both feet as soon as I got familiar with them. And so it feels good to give back, and I'm gaining a wonderful community, and
Did you is but the woman empowered recovery, that's your thing, right? That's
that's my
something that you
company.
started?
Yes, yes.
What
So
is that a similar type of thing? You've just taken it to maybe just individual coaching, not group
yes,
coaching,
well,
or?
I do one-on-one coaching virtually, like you and I are talking right now, or if people are in my area with the help of horses. I also conduct workshops and retreats. And so when I first started coaching, my company was called Amazing Outlook Coaching, because that was very how I felt about life, after getting sober and so on and so forth. And so, but I've just gone through this rebranding because I really wanted it to be crystal clear who I worked with. And that is women who really empower themselves to recover from life's challenges. And so, I've just gone through this rebranding, and I feel so strongly that we all need a space where we feel comfortable and safe enough to be vulnerable and authentic, and know that we're not going to be judged. And that's what I provide for my clients.
And is that what the retreats are based around? The women empowered recovery? Is that you do the retreats through that?
Yeah. Yeah. So my
Tell us
company,
about these retreats. They looked really cool. I was on your website looking at these. These things look really cool.
thank you. Well, I've got two in the well, one is definitely has launched, and that one is taking place in September here in Colorado at a wonderful guest ranch. And I'm co-facilitating with another master Equus Coach Facilitator who is also in recovery. And so we're gonna, host 12 women and, really give them an opportunity to, dive deep and have some fun with the horses at the same time. So it's going to be
Is
a
the
really
is the
fabulous.
woman empowered recovery, is that based around using the horses for the therapy, or is it do you have a lot of different modalities
Well,
within that?
like I said, I do virtual life coaching and in-person coaching with the horses. All of right now, I'm not planning any type of in-person gathering that doesn't include horses, because it just is so powerful to work with horses. It just is a very magical and efficient way to coach. because the horses give you so much feedback. And so that's my favorite way to coach. And so it's, for me, it's just part of my favorite way to work with women is with horses.
You know, people who haven't had the pleasure of being around horses, we had 3 horses when we had this little ranch out here in California, and the kids grew up around them.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you what, unless you've been able to spend some time with horses, you don't really get the soul of a horse. You know,
Right.
I mean, their eyes, their eyelashes, their nose, just the feel of their nose and their gentleness, their intuitiveness, you know, how tied in they are with you. It's a really incredible thing.
Well,
It's a blessing. So how do you use the horses, or how do you and the horses together work to heal people?
well, that's the beautiful thing about horses is they, you know, my saying is horses are magic. And I truly believe that because they are so intuitive and they are so sensitive, and because they can feel our heartbeat from up to 4 feet away, right? They don't care about your paycheck or um, what's on your resume. They care about the energy that you're putting out into the world. And they can pick up on that, right? They know when you're full of shit and when you're not. And so, because of that, they are really powerful co-facilitators. I can watch them as I'm coaching someone, and if what the client is saying to me doesn't match what's going on inside of them, the horse senses that incongruity and they'll respond accordingly. So when they sense the incongruity, then they don't trust that person, right? And when they don't trust something, they move away from it because they they don't trust you, right? But when your insides meet your outsides and they're congruent and you acknowledge that, yeah, shit has hit the fan, they don't care that shit has hit the fan. They care that you're being authentic about the shit hitting the fan, right? So now they're going to be curious because they can sense that authenticity, and they'll connect with the client when they're authentic. And that's where the magic happens, because they're not going to connect if they don't trust you.
Yeah.
But when they connect, it's just like you can take a deep breath and you can relax, and the horse leans into you or starts licking and chewing and showing that you're not alone, that they are your partner in this moment. And it's all about being in the present moment and knowing that in that moment, you're safe and you're honored and you're respected by this huge animal who could, hurt you if if it wanted to, but it doesn't, because that's not what they do. Because they're prey animals, they have to be aware of what's going on around them, and they also, they're not predators, so they're not dangerous unless they're in, being pursued.
Yeah, then they'll kick your head off. I
Right.
love I love how their ears can turn all the way, like
Oh
they'll
yeah.
be looking forward. It's like, what was that?
Yep.
You
Yep.
just see their ears. We had rescues, and Chief was just an old trail horse that they didn't want anymore because he was just an old trail horse, and we loved him. He was so safe with the kids. He was so
uh,
bomb proof. They could hang on him, lay on him, pull his tail. they could, it didn't matter. I never was worried about Chief. They could feed him, with their little tiny hands. He would never bite him or hurt him.
Oh yeah.
Cheyenne had been really abused, so Cheyenne was I was a lot more careful with her. I kept the kids away from
Hmm.
her, but it took years to work with her. It took years to build her trust
Right.
because she just, had been abused. So when you work with these women and these horses, are they riding? Are they brushing? Are they
No,
feeding? I mean, what type of interaction do the women have with the horses?
we're on the ground. There's no riding involved. And we're doing mostly what we're doing is just chatting. We're talking about what's happening in their life at that moment. And how the horse responds gives me a lot of clues. And so, sometimes we do some grooming, sometimes we do, like in a workshop, we'll do a group activity. But it's so powerful just to watch the interaction. I was trained to, we could do different things with the horse, move the horse and see how the horse responded to your communication skills and so on and so forth like that. And what I have found is my clients want to hang out with the horse and talk to me about what's getting in their way. And so, doing all I don't want to call it bells and whistles, but that's really what the client wants to do is just hang out with the horse and talk to me and try to peel the layers back, right? And connect with this incredible animal. And so
Yeah.
that's what we do. And it's
So
just
those
magic.
retreats must be kind of almost spiritual in a way for a lot of people, especially if you get some city slicker who's never really been around a horse and
Very.
right? I mean, some of the best times I had with my kids is mucking the stalls and brushing the horses and
Yep.
feeding them, when they were little. It's like going in and just petting them, just rubbing on them and feeling them. And I
Right.
remember, the boys were, I think, 6 and 8 when we got the ranch. So they were little, and just when Chief would bend his head down to nudge their head, like, pet me, come here, I
Yeah.
want you, and don't be afraid of me, I'm okay. And then just the first time you rub a horse's nose, you're hooked. You'll never, ever not want to rub a horse's nose.
Well, um, I the horse's chin is actually my favorite part
Mhm.
just because they're so different, funny. But I have never met a horse that I haven't kissed on its nose. And so, um, you know, I kissed a horse and I liked it.
That's my next bumper sticker. I think
There
I'm
you
gonna
go.
get that. So you've got a lot of different things that you're kind of doing. I mean, you've got the life coaching, the Equus coaching, you've got the master facilitator, the She Recovers coaching, you've got your, women empowerment recovery. Where do you see next for you? What's Nancy McKay? Where are you going to take all this stuff? If as long as you're, who cares if your husband's pissed or not? Where are you going to go? Where you, he's just going to have to suck it up. All right. So
Well,
what's Nancy going to do next with all this?
I'm hoping to do a lot more workshops and retreats. And ultimately, I would love to take a retreat to Ireland. I would love to do one in Scotland. I'd love to do lots more around the country. Um, Working with a group of women is, I think, really my sweet spot. And helping, when you're with a group of like-hearted women who are, maybe they don't know each other, but by the end of the weekend, they're connected and they have found kindred spirits. And that's how I really enjoy hanging out with women that feel the way I do about life, and so it's I do it for myself as much as I do it for them. I mean, it's a building of a community. And when you're talking about recovery of any kind, you can't do that in a silo. You got to have a community to heal with. And that's what I find so powerful and so interesting for me. That's what keeps me, really in the game. And then when I get to work with women one-on-one, then that's really powerful. So, I just want to do more of it. And um, you know, I just want to I would love to be coaching in one way or another all the time.
It just takes time. It takes time
Yeah,
to
it
build
does.
something up and find your niche and stuff. But I'll tell you,
Yeah.
it's beautiful what you're doing because it's very lonely in recovery. It can be very lonely in recovering of any kind.
Mhm.
Cancer, when you have cancer, you know, it can be very lonely. The hours spent in the chemo room and people not sure how to react to you. And when you lose a spouse like I did, you get the casseroles for the first week, and then the casseroles disappear, and then
Right.
people just go on with their life. They don't, they go on with their life. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel bad for them, but I got shit to do. So, recovery, grief, cancers, abuse, all these different things that people go through can be a really lonely process to have. So to have someone like you who's facilitating these groups and retreats where people can get together with like-minded people and you don't feel bad sharing your shit, right? Because in
Right.
real life, out in the real world, we were like, I don't want to burden people with my shit. But in these groups, that's the whole idea, right? And it makes
Right.
people feel safe, makes
Right.
people feel like we can get through this stuff together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love it. So tell us about your retreat. So what do you have coming up? Where are these going on and what's the deal?
So I've got a one-day workshop in February happening on February 22nd. There's 2 spots left, and that's at Happy Dog Ranch in Sedalia, Colorado, which is just south of Denver.
Mhm.
And then I have another one going to happen at the same place in April 5th. Then I have a retreat scheduled for the same place, Happy Dog Ranch, the end of July, July 31st to August 3rd. And then I have another retreat in September at the Sylvandale Guest Ranch in Loveland, Colorado, and that will be September 21st to the 24th.
Wow. And all of this stuff is on your website. So what's your
Yes,
website again so people can find this and start booking these retreats with you?
great. My website is womenempoweredrecovery.com.
Okay. So we're going to make sure that that's all on the website. People could just click on it, look it up, find it, go to that and go to these retreats. Um, I lied to you earlier. I told you I just had one question, but I lied. Dudes lie. Guys are liars. I do ask my what if you could question, but I also ask one last question at the end, that I don't give people a heads up about because I don't want them thinking about it. But
Oh, great.
so my last question is, that I ask everybody, if there was a last thought, a quote that you love or a thought that you have or a wish for the world or whatever it is, if there's something you'd like to leave our guests with, something that means something to Nancy McKay and that you'd like to share, what would that last thought be?
You're never too old. It's never too late and, go after whatever it is that you want to go after. I was, like I said, I was 61 when I started training to become a life coach. And, a lot of people were shaking their head at me thinking, saying, what are you, nuts? And I'm like, I've still got a lot of kick in me. And, I'm going to be 68 years old on Sunday, and I have no intention of not doing as many retreats and workshops and working with clients as I possibly can for as long as I can. That's retirement is not going to be part of my future. I'm rewiring, not retiring. So
I love that. I'm rewiring, not retiring. And I tell you, I've done a lot of podcasts with people in their 80s who started in their late 60s and 70s. It's like, especially women. It's like, I've already done the shit. I'm not going to be changing my husband's diapers. I'm out of here. I got stuff to do. I love him. Don't get me wrong. I'll change him occasionally, but I got stuff to do. I mean, and I think age is just doesn't mean anything anymore. I
it
mean, the
really
people
doesn't.
I've interviewed in their 80s, just blow my mind.
Yeah,
And I'm like, dude, you're just getting started. He's like, oh yeah. I've been interviewed a dude who's 84 who's like could kick my ass. I mean, he's literally just getting started, and it's all about finding your passion, right?
that's exactly what
Passion
it is.
and your mission will keep you going when
Yeah,
other stuff won't. And it looks like you're finding your passion here, and it's awesome.
yeah, that's definitely the case.
I love it. Well, everybody, this was Nancy McKay. That hour just whizzed by. We covered
It
so
did.
much, and I know there's so much more to Nancy we could have covered. But again, Nancy's involved with a life coach, an Equus coach, a master facilitator. She works with the She Recovers coach. She has her woman empowerment recovery. We're going to put her website on there so you could check into her coaching, check into her retreats. Nance has survived a lot of stuff, and you're kicking ass and taking names, and I love it.
Thank you so much. This
I
has
love it,
really been
kiddo.
a pleasure.
Yay. All right, everybody. That was another episode of the What If You Could podcast with Nancy McKay. And thank you for showing up. And we'll see you guys later. Thanks, Nance.
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.